After 50 years of buried anger, an incredible truth was revealed that changed everything forever. Jack Thompson stood at the edge of the garage, his calloused hands trembling as he surveyed the scattered remnants of a life built on grease and metal. The acrid scent of smoke still lingered in the air, a painful reminder of the inferno that had consumed not just his family's business, but an entire legacy. His heart raced, not just from the shock of losing the garage, but from the undercurrent of emotions he had spent decades suppressing. Beneath the surface, a storm brewed, anger churning like a relentless engine, fueled by a lifetime of being trapped in his father's shadow. He had poured himself into the mechanics of cars, meticulously tuning each engine as a way to escape the suffocating grip of his past. But now, with the charred remains of the garage still smoldering, the echoes of his father's harsh lessons enveloped him. "Never show weakness," the old man had said, voice booming like thunder during a storm. Jack had lived by those words, shoving his feelings deep down, where they festered like an untended wound. But that anger, now exposed after the fire, felt like a double-edged sword. It shielded him from hurt, yet isolated him from the one person he wanted to connect with, his son, Tim. Jack's gravelly voice broke the silence of the empty garage as he muttered to himself about the absurdity of it all. Why had he even bothered trying to be a good father? Tim was constantly slipping through his fingers, just like the tools he had tried so hard to keep in pristine condition. Jack gripped the toolbox tightly, heart pounding against his ribs as doubts invaded his mind. Was he failing, or was it the very legacy his father had handed him that needed dismantling? The thought sent shivers down his spine, a blend of resentment and regret intertwining in a bitter cocktail. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As he sat on the cold floor, mind racing through memories of Tim's half-hearted attempts to connect a shared hunting trip, a quick game of catch, Jack winced at the thought of it all. His son deserved better than this emotionally charged silence, yet Jack found it impossible to bridge the chasm his father's harsh teachings had carved between them. Maybe anger was all he knew, a legacy handed down and now inescapable. Then, buried under a pile of scattered papers, the remnants of his life's work, something caught his eye, an old, dust-covered envelope. He hesitated, breath catching in his throat. Could this be another hidden piece of shame radiating from his father's dark past? He pulled it from the debris, the weight of unresolved questions pressing down. What had his father hidden? What else had his father been too stubborn to acknowledge? As he thumbed through the contents, dread pooled in his stomach. The unspoken tragedy, the siblings he never knew, suddenly loomed larger than the fire that had taken everything from him. Jack wrestled with the urge to throw the papers away, to preserve the last shreds of his father's carefully constructed world. But he couldn't ignore the gnawing need for clarity, the yearning to understand the truth he had long buried with his anger. The layers of his anger peeled back, revealing not just the complexities of his father's choices, but a critical choice of his own, a willingness to confront the past or remain shackled by it. Closing his eyes, Jack sensed the growing urgency within him. Somewhere in the tangled web of family secrets lay the answer, the key to unlocking a future where he and Tim could finally reconnect. Should he dive headfirst into this abyss of revelation, risking everything he's ever known, or would this path only deepen the wounds that already lay unhealed? Choices loomed ahead, and with them came the haunting realization that this journey was not just about discovering family, it was about saving his own. Jack felt the weight of the envelope in his hand like a leaden anchor, a stark reminder that he was at a critical juncture in his life. The embers of the fire in the garage flickered, casting an almost ghostly glow, as if urging him to confront the shadows of his past. It was time to shed the remnants of fear and step into the light, even if it felt uncomfortable. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. It was as if he could hear his father's voice echoing in the corners of the ruined garage, "Don't be a coward. Face what needs to be faced." But Jack understood now that true courage wasn't just about facing physical challenges, it was about unraveling the emotional knots that had tied him in place for too long. Accepting vulnerability was a daunting prospect, yet beneath it lay the liberating potential for growth. The moment he tore through the envelope, a whirlwind of mixed feelings surged through him. Pages crammed with faded photographs and handwritten notes painted a portrait of family dynamics that were both foreign and painfully familiar. Siblings he had never met stared back at him, smiling faces that hinted at both joy and loss. Jack's heart clenched as he absorbed their stories, the fragmented chronicles of lives intertwined in ways he had never imagined. His thoughts turned to Tim. Would revealing these family secrets help him understand his own struggles with disappointment and estranged connections? Was it possible those same issues were at the core of his relationship with his son? Jack's resolve grew with each page he examined. Facing the ghosts of his family was no longer a choice, it was an urgent necessity. Fueled by newfound determination, he began to reconstruct the history behind the names and faces sketched in those photographs. Each image mirrored a pair of eyes he now recognized as part of him, a lineage he had long shunned in an attempt to escape the grip of his father's expectations. Jack realized these very connections might hold the key to breaking the cycle of anger that had ensnared him for decades. With every moment spent deciphering the faded ink, Jack uncovered stories that not only reflected his father's failures but illuminated his own. These revelations ignited a simmering desire within him, a desire to build something new, something better for Tim. He envisioned sharing these findings, not as burdens but as vessels of truth that could bridge the gap between them, yet, the pathway forward was steeped in uncertainty. Would Tim be ready to embrace a past he had never known? What if the truth buried in those pages only amplified their differences? Jack's thoughts churned with the weight of the possible outcomes. But he was done hiding behind the veneer of stoicism. He no longer wanted to simply respond to life, he would seize control. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the garage, Jack made a decision. He would confront Tim, share these revelations, and risk the vulnerability that terrified him. The thought ignited a flicker of hope mingled with trepidation. Were they both ready to face the truth and the shadows lurking in their relationship? Determined, he stuffed the papers back into the envelope, pocketing it like a talisman of change. The air felt different now, charged with potential, haunting yet electrifying. Jack knew that this was just the beginning of a journey fraught with struggles and risks, yet he felt the stirrings of courage stirring deep within. But with every step toward connecting with Tim, Jack's stomach churned with another disturbing thought. One final revelation lay ahead, and he had yet to uncover the most shocking truth that could unravel everything he thought he knew about his father and himself. Would he have the strength to face it? The looming question filled his mind, propelling him into the unknown. The morning light streamed through the cracked windows of the garage, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Jack sat at the rickety table, the envelope still nestled in his pocket, its weight now a heavy reminder of the task ahead. Today, he would not only share the discoveries with Tim but also confront the tangled mess that had been his relationship with his own father. As he mentally prepared for the conversation, a wave of doubt crashed over him. What if revealing the past only deepened the rift with his son? Jack paused, the thought gnawing at him. Communication had never been easy between them, especially since Tim had entered those turbulent teenage years. Would sharing this fragile history help them connect, or would it push them further apart? Like two ships navigating storm-tossed seas, he picked up one of the photographs, a faded image of his father's youthful face, and traced the lines of the smile. It reminded him of Tim's expression, a resemblance he had once taken comfort in but now felt burdened by. How much had he mirrored his father in avoiding confrontation, in withholding love and truth? There was a critical shift brewing within him. This wasn't merely about family revelations, it was a reckoning for Jack himself. His phone buzzed, interrupting his thoughts. It was a message from Tim, "Can we talk later?" The words felt like a lifeline and a brick tied to his heart. Jack knew he had to share the truth before the dread of timidity closed him off again. He had pushed Tim away for too long, and building walls to shield himself would no longer suffice. He had a chance to break this cycle. After a long moment of hesitation, he began to craft a plan. He needed to present the envelope, filled with photographs and stories, not as burdens but as threads to weave their relationship back together. Each piece represented voices from the past that had a place in their present, guiding them both toward a better understanding of where they came from. Jack took a deep breath, focusing on articulation rather than emotions. He would explain how these familial connections were tangled with anger but also love, and how sharing this information could redefine their future. If they could confront the hidden truths together, perhaps healing was possible. As he laid the envelope carefully on the table, he closed his eyes, visualizing the conversation. The warmth of the sun felt comforting, as if it were nudging him toward openness, urging him to step into honesty rather than retreating into fear. Jack also planned to share what he learned about himself through the process. Confronting his father's mistakes meant challenging his own learned responses, breaking away from the habit of emotional suppression. Each secret unveiled gave shadow to the light, a vision of who he could be, a father willing to embrace vulnerability. The digital clock on the wall ticked on, and with each passing second, his resolve strengthened. Today would change everything. It was not merely about revealing family history, but about shattering the silence that had defined them for far too long. As he collected his thoughts, another unsettling realization hit him. What if Tim didn't want to know? What if his son rejected the very idea of engaging with a lineage marred by pain? The doubt wrapped around him, but he swallowed it as he often did, with determination and a choice to move forward. Time slipped away, and soon Jack heard the familiar sound of tires crunching on gravel. Steeling himself, he welcomed the rising tide of anticipation and fear alike. This was not just about Jack or Tim, it was about breaking free from the chains of inherited trauma, generations old. The moment had arrived. As the door creaked open, Jack's heart raced. This was the moment he'd prepared for, the confrontation of past and present. Would it lead to the connection he desperately sought, or would it shatter the fragile peace they both navigated? The answer awaited him in the truth that hung between them, like an unyielding bridge yet to be crossed. Tim stepped into the garage, his face a mixture of curiosity and hesitation. Jack's heart thudded louder as he forced himself to maintain eye contact. "Hey," Tim said, his tone light but laced with something deeper, an invitation but also a wall. "Hey," Jack replied, his throat tight. There it was, the gulf of unspoken truths and strains of resentment tethering them. Tim's gaze flicked to the table, resting on the envelope that lay open, edged with the past he had yet to fully understand. "What's that?" Tim gestured, an undercurrent of uncertainty threading through his voice. Jack gulped, recognition of the gravity of the moment crashing down on him. "These there for us. It's about your granddad." And he paused for a moment, "and me." The words felt heavy, like stones thrown into a still pond, set to ripple through their lives. Tim's brow furrowed. "You mean, like, family history?" "Yes," Jack answered, fervently pushing past the instinct to retreat, to sweep everything back under the rug. "But it's more complicated than that." A silence stretched between them, pregnant with anticipation. Jack could feel the distant echo of his own father's unforgiving demeanor, an audio loop that urged him to fall silent. But he couldn't let his son step into those same traps. "There are things about my relationship with my dad that, well, it's time to share them. I need you to know why I've struggled to talk to you." Tim crossed his arms, the familiar defensive posture that marked these conversations. "Why now? What happened? Did something change?" Jack's pulse raced. The moment felt fragile but vital. "I've spent so long denying my feelings and avoiding uncomfortable truths. But I realize now that hiding the past just keeps us trapped. I didn't want that for you." The vulnerability in his own reckoning flooded the room. Tim's face softened slightly, curiosity mingling with skepticism. "So what's in that envelope?" Jack leaned forward, weight shifting in his chair, his palms pressed together in a plea for openness. "It's letters, photographs, memories. They reveal how anger and regret drove a wedge in our family. I think if we understand them, we could change that for ourselves." His son hesitated before moving closer to the envelope, curiosity curling his fingers as he started to sift through the contents. Jack felt a rush of hope mingled with trepidation. What if Tim uncovered something he couldn't bear? "Why didn't you ever tell me?" Tim asked after pulling out a photograph of Jack's father, looking blissful and carefree. It wasn't just about me. I wanted to protect you from all this, Jack answered, a lump forming in his throat. But I realize I was just protecting myself. I didn't want to confront my own failures, my own father's shadow. The tension hung palpable in the air. Jack could sense the shift in Tim, fragile understanding hovering just within reach. But if we don't face it, we're just repeating the cycle, Jack continued, feeling uncomfortably exposed. I've let fear dictate our relationship for too long. Tim's expression transformed. Confusion bridged into contemplation, and for the first time in years, Jack saw the flicker of an authentic connection. You mean I can know this history? It's not just baggage, it could yes, Jack interjected, with fervor rippling through him. It's knowledge. Discovery. A way to break the chains of how it has been between us. In that moment, Tim's defenses seemed to crumble, and Jack took a breath as he pushed aside the emotional shield he had built up for so long. This was the essence of fatherhood, revealing both wounds and the healing that can come from honesty. As the minutes ticked away, they navigated the stories, uncovering layers about family, pain, and forgiveness that had long been buried. Jack watched as Tim wrestled with the complexities of legacy and identity, feeling both terror and exhilaration at the intimate exchange. And then, just as they appeared to breach the surface of reconciliation, Jack felt a new wave of anxiety wash over him. There was still so much left unsaid, implications of vulnerability stretching before them. Tell me, Tim, Jack's voice faltered. What does this mean for us? Can we truly face this history together? Tim's eyes met his, searching for certainty, as new tension sparked between them. The answer danced tantalizingly close, just beyond reach. But instead of clarity, uncertainty loomed larger than ever. The clock crashed forward, its hands moving relentlessly, and they stood at the precipice of new beginnings. What lay ahead was an unknown path, one that would require courage to traverse. The echoes of the past coiled with the possibility of resilience, urging them to confront their shadows and rewrite their story. The very future of their relationship lay suspended in the air, waiting for Jack to make that leap of faith. Would he take it, leaving the comfort of silence behind, or would he let fear once more dictate their fate? The garage felt smaller as the weight of their conversation settled in, stifling and claustrophobic. Jack noticed Tim's fingers tremble slightly as he ran them over the photograph. The resemblance was striking. It was unnerving to see his father's face encapsulated in a moment of happiness, wholly unaware of the chaos that would ensue. What were you like when he was alive? Did you ever talk to him about this? Tim asked, a genuine curiosity breaking through his earlier defensive stance. Jack closed his eyes as the memory fluttered back to him, a younger version of himself, burdened with unspoken frustration and anger. No, I didn't have the language for it then. I bottled things up and hoped they would just go away. Tim shifted uneasily. I don't want to repeat that, he said quietly. Jack's heart clenched. The realization that his son was more attuned to the wreckage of silence than he had understood struck him with clarity. Then let us talk about it. Whatever you need to ask, I'll answer. Tim's eyes seemed to sharpen, but there was still hesitation in his voice. It's just, what if it hurts too much? What if uncovering these memories just brings up all the bad stuff? Jack met his son's gaze, a steely resolve developing within him. They had tiptoed around pain long enough. It might hurt, but we can't heal what we don't confront. It's like a wound that never got stitched, just festering away, becoming infected. The truth resonated in the small space, ricocheting off the walls. Jack realized he wasn't just talking about the past anymore, he was addressing their present. His pulse quickened, knowing that breaking their cycle might rest entirely on this vulnerable juncture. When Tim finally nodded, a silent agreement hung in the air. Jack could sense the fissures of doubt that formed when their history intensified. He leaned forward, determination hardening his voice. What do you want to know? Tell me everything, Tim said, his tone steadier. Jack felt a rush of both freedom and dread. As he began to unravel the stories behind the photos, he felt like a dam threatening to burst. My dad, he was hard on me. There was a burden of expectation. He wanted me to achieve everything he never could. But he was also scared he couldn't show affection for fear of appearing weak. The words spilled out in a torrent, revealing layers Jack had protected for so long. And with each story, Jack saw comprehension dawn on Tim's face, threading through his emotions like sunlight breaking a grim dawn. I remember one time when I had failed a math test. I was terrified of telling him, but I thought if I faced him, maybe we could talk it out. I just stood in the doorway, and he never looked up from his paper. I waited there, hoping for something, a sign, some acknowledgement, but it never came. Tim shifted, processing his father's raw honesty. So, you never really got closure with him? No. I was so busy holding on to my anger that I never realized it was poisoning me. I pushed people away, including you. Jack's admission was delivered with weighted gravity, revealing a lifetime of regret. What about your granddad? Was he the same way? Tim asked, his brows knitted in thought. Jack swallowed hard. In many ways. He was imposing, a man of few words, but I learned that he had a heart buried beneath layers of stoicism. Still, his neglect shaped me, made me think showing emotion was a weakness. I wanted to break that cycle for you. Tim's face reflected newfound understanding, yet there hung an undeniable tension in the spaces unspoken. Can we start over? Like, really work on this? I don't want to walk away from this just for fear of hurting each other. Jack felt the desire to embrace those words, but doubt flickered in the back of his mind, a reminder of the ease of slipping back into silence. We need to face it all first before we can rebuild, he murmured, wrestling with his own instincts. As Tim gave a slight nod, Jack's resolve solidified. They were stepping into uncharted territory, and it called for courage. Just then, a ringing phone interrupted the moment, breaking their fragile connection. Tim's expression shifted, the fleeting shadow of fear returning as he fumbled for his phone. Tim, Jack said, a sudden urge driving him to solidify this bond. If we're going to do this, we have to promise to really confront the hard stuff. Tim looked at him, somewhere between acknowledgement and uncertainty. Jack's heart raced as the phone buzzed in his son's hand. Hello? Tim answered, his voice trembling slightly. As he listened, Jack could feel the air thicken with expectation. Tim's face contorted into a mix of confusion and alarm, pulling Jack momentarily from his thoughts. Dad, it's my mom, Tim said, shock lacing his voice. She wants to talk to us both. Jack's breath caught in his throat. The past had begun to claw its way back, but they had taken a step. Would this confrontation lead to liberation or suffocate their newfound resolve? The moment hung in the balance, thick with uncertainty about what lay ahead. Jack's pulse quickened. Nothing could prepare them for what was to follow. Tim's voice pierced through the tension, a lifeline to unearthed emotions. She's on her way over, he said, trying to mask his own anxiety. What do we do? The question hung in the air, its implications vast. Jack felt the walls of the garage constricting around him again, the weight of unvoiced fears pressing heavily against his chest. He had faced the ghosts of his past, but the prospect of Tim's mother arriving felt like confronting a beast long hidden in the shadows. The very thought ignited a swirl of unease and necessity. We prepare, Jack stated, each word carrying the urgency of his anxiety. We decide what we want to say, what we need to protect, and, most importantly, what we're willing to confront. Tim's brow furrowed. But what if she just wants to talk about the past? What if it's just a facade? I don't want to repeat our mistakes. Jack stepped closer, grounding himself in his son's intensity. This is about shifting the paradigm, son. It's an opportunity to redefine our roles and the narrative. Only through confrontation can we move forward, not just with her, but with ourselves. Tim fell silent, a weight settling on his shoulders. Jack considered the broader significance of what lay ahead and how deeply the conversation held potential for healing or further fracturing their tenuous bond. That in the heart of their struggle, Jack recalled moments buried deep within him, memories of his wife's laughter, the warmth of family dinners, and the shadow that followed through every joyous occasion. He too had suppressed emotions, carrying the burden of past grievances instead of acknowledging their reality. It wasn't merely about Tim's estrangement from his mother, it was about their collective detachment from vulnerability. "Let us think through this," he said, trying to encourage Tim through the haze of uncertainty. "What do you want from this conversation? What are you hoping will change?" Tim glanced at the garage door, his gaze distant. "I want answers. I want to understand why she left. Why she couldn't communicate with me growing up. I need closure." The admission was a crack in the armor he had donned for so long. Jack recognized the fierce determination in his son's voice. "That's a powerful place to start. We're not just digging for blame, we're laying a foundation where we can rebuild whatever is left. This could be our chance to rewrite our family's narrative." A flicker of hope ignited in Tim's eyes, balancing precariously on the edge of fear. "What if it just leads to more questions? What if she can't give me what I need?" "That's a risk we have to take," Jack replied, feeling a sudden urgency. "Silence has brought us to this moment, but we cannot remain mute any longer." Tim nodded, an understanding passing between them. They were bound in this moment not just as father and son, but as two individuals confronting their shared legacy of silence. As they prepared to help their past unravel, Jack felt a simmering rage and sadness rise in him, fighting to wrest control away from the fear that had for too long kept him from discussing uncomfortable truths. He had lived in the shadows, allowing fear to dictate the narrative. But what if this encounter could break that cycle for both of them? Then, the sound of tires crunching on gravel cut through his thoughts, snapping him back to reality. "She's here." Tim's expression shifted instantly, a blend of determination and dread. Jack sensed that whatever came next would not simply unearth the past, it would redefine their future, potentially capturing the lost connections they needed, or plunging them into deeper turmoil. He placed a steadying hand on Tim's shoulder. "Remember, we tackle this together. Whatever happens, we won't turn away from it again." Tim took a deep breath, steeling himself for the impending confrontation. Jack's heart raced as the door creaked open. What awaited them beyond that threshold was uncharted territory, riddled with potential for both revelation and heartache. As they stepped into that new reality, Jack's mind raced with the impending weight of truth. Could they withstand what would unravel? Would they finally confront the exquisite pain that came from revealing long-buried emotions? With every heartbeat, the stakes rose, and Jack understood that the moment of truth had arrived, but questions loomed larger than answers, and innocence may yet pay the price. Jack stood frozen in the doorway, the creak of the metal hinges echoing like a heartbeat, a countdown to the moment he had feared and anticipated. A figure stepped into the dimness of the garage, harbinger of years of suppressed emotions. Tim stiffened beside him, and Jack could feel the tension radiating between them, a charged electric current of uncertainty. "Mom." Tim's voice was no more than a whisper, carrying the weight of a lifetime spent in longing and absence. As she took a step forward, Jack scanned her face, searching for the familiar contours of the woman who had once been an integral part of their lives. Time had left its imprint, yet he could still see traces of her youth and vitality reflected in her eyes, shadows of the mother Tim had lost. Memories surged, flooding him with the warmth of family moments, then retreating, only to be replaced by the cool clench of resentment. "Tim," she breathed, her voice cracking, revealing the fragility underneath. There was a flicker of recognition in her gaze, but it was eclipsed by a cautious reluctance. Jack felt his insides twist. Would this be the encounter that forged a new path or another chapter in their silent saga of disconnection? Silence swirled heavily. Jack stepped in, feeling a surge of responsibility wash over him. This was not just about Tim, it was an opportunity for both of them to face their pasts and move forward into a future that they had long imagined yet never dared to grasp. "You have a lot to discuss." The words fell out, more assertive than he intended, each syllable laced with the weight of expectation. Tim shot his father a bewildered glance, as if unsure who would take charge of this delicate meeting. Jack was acutely aware that confrontation was no longer an abstract concept, it was a tangible presence in the air around them, waiting to be ignited. "I didn't come here to fight," she said, her eyes flitting nervously between father and son, a questioning openness hanging in the air. "I want to be honest." Tim's jaw tightened, but he didn't retreat. Instead, Jack saw a flicker of hope mixing with the anger in his son's expression. The potential for deep truths lying ahead called to both of them, tempting but fraught with risk. "Honesty starts with understanding," Jack urged, subtly redirecting the tone of the conversation. "What happened? Why did you leave?" At his prompting, Tim's face contorted with emotions he struggled to articulate. Dread and anger coiled within him. Jack couldn't be sure how this would unfold, but he felt a shift within himself. His voice steadied, fueled by a newfound determination to dismantle the walls built over the years. "I need to know why," Tim pressed, each word tinged with urgency. "I want to understand what drove us apart, why you couldn't just talk to me." Her face softened for a moment, a fleeting acknowledgement of the pain they had all endured. "It wasn't just about leaving," she began, her voice trembling as she navigated the currents of her own unexplainable decisions. "It was fear of hurting you both even more." Fear. The very word rattled in Jack's mind, echoing his own history of allowing fear to dictate his actions. He felt the urge to reach out, to connect not just as her son's father, but as a human confronted with the same vulnerabilities. "But silence only deepens the wounds," Jack interjected, feeling the gravity of the words land in the space between them like a stone skipped across a silent lake. Tim's gaze was piercing, and Jack realized how crucial this moment was not only for them but for the path ahead. Could this be the moment they confront the specters that had haunted their family for so long? As the pieces of their narrative threatened to shift under the weight of shared confessions, Jack sensed a precious opportunity for transformation, yet the fear of disruption still lurked nearby. They were on the precipice of awakening long-hidden truths, but as tension mounted, a sudden shift flickered across Tim's face, a realization that clawed at his clarity. "What will I do with the answers? What if they just cut deeper?" Jack caught his breath, knowing Tim faced a pivotal question, one that extended far beyond this moment. And just as he was about to respond, a crashing sound echoed from outside, the abrupt interruption sending shockwaves through the fragile atmosphere they had constructed. What was it now? Jack's heart raced. Could they afford to unravel deeply buried truths alongside the chaos of their estrangement? He felt the urgency to reshape not only Tim's understanding of his mother but also his own. The moment of truth was at hand, but it remained bound within layers of uncertainty. Paradoxically, each revelation now held the potential to both liberate and ensnare them, leaving Jack to wonder if they could brave the tempest brewing within. A new understanding was required, but would they be prepared for what was about to emerge, for better or worse? The violent crash echoed once more, pulling Jack's attention from the fragile moment of connection they had begun to forge. The stark reality outside the garage crept into his mind like an unwelcome guest, shattering the delicate atmosphere. He glanced toward Tim, whose eyes flickered between fear and curiosity, a volatile cocktail of emotions brewing beneath the surface. "Stay here," Jack advised, steeling himself before stepping past the threshold, almost instinctively shielding Tim from whatever lay beyond. Each step felt heavy, weighted by the fear of what might lurk outside and the relentless guilt threatening to suffocate him into silence. Outside, a scene unraveled before him, the remnants of his and Tim's lives, disheveled and chaotic. A stray cat darted across the street, its panicked movements reflecting Jack's own internal disarray. What had he missed while they were buried in their own wounds? Noticing a neighbor's garage door ajar, he felt an unsettling kinship. Everyone's lives contained elements of turmoil and disorder, stitched together by shared fear and memory. "Jack!" Tim's voice called from the doorway. "What's happening?" With a rush of urgency, Jack turned back to his son. "Nothing. Just stay close for now," he replied, uncertainty creeping into his voice. As he walked back, his mind raced through the lessons he'd learned as a father: how to be present, the importance of safety, the impact of vulnerability. Yet, how had those lessons often rung hollow when faced with the reality of this family's fracture? In that instant, he decided that they could no longer remain passive witnesses to their own lives. "Mom," he said as he stepped back, directly addressing the woman cloaked in their past, "if we're going to do this, let us do it properly. Bring everything to the surface." Jack's voice was firmer now, the wavering uncertainty replaced by a rising tide of resolve. This was the moment to shed remnants of fear and to redefine everything they had once known. Tim's eyes widened at his father's assertiveness. Jack was astonished by the feeling that coursed through him. An unfamiliar joy seeped into the fatigue of years spent trudging through emotional quicksand. The readiness to confront truths would lay a newfound foundation for them all. His mother shifted uncomfortably, her fingers fidgeting with the layered fabric of her sweater. "I didn't think I'd ever have the chance." Her voice quivered. To explain, Jack didn't allow the hesitation to linger. "Then explain. For God's sake, we're ready to hear it. Each of us holds scars that need attention." Tim's gaze shifted from Jack to his mother, contemplating the weight of Jack's unyielding insistence. A shared breath of collective anticipation hung in the air, as if they had opened the curtain to a stage long abandoned. The silence intertwined them, and Jack could almost see the words forming in her mind, preparing for release. Would they be worth the cost of exposing their truths? "We were all afraid," she finally confessed, her voice now steadier. "Afraid of losing each other, yet losing ourselves in different ways. I left to protect." "Protect us from what?" It was Tim who broke the delicate silence, deploying a mix of urgency and defiance. His resolve began to crystallize into something more articulate. The question hung, haunting the space between them as the gravity of its implication manifested. Jack recognized the glimmer of his own doubts reflected in Tim's eyes, a reminder that the notion of protection could sometimes be a twisted form of neglect. Jack took a deep breath, the weight of a revelation simmering just beneath the surface. "Your mother's fears are echoes of choices that haunt us." Within him, doubts began to shift as resolve solidified. As they embarked on this journey of discovery, the courage to face both the chaos outside and the chaos within surged forward. But alongside the promise of unearthing truth lay the sobering reality that these revelations could also unravel them completely. Jack's heart quickened at the thought, feeling the shadow of potential fallout hovering nearby. Could they withstand the upheaval that lay ahead? As Tim's gaze remained locked onto his mother, Jack felt the pull to push forward. The longer they delayed confronting the implications, the deeper the rift may grow. He realized something fundamental: the opportunities for growth blossom at the precipice of fear, and clarity did not always come hand in hand with comfort. With a determined glance, Jack prepared to guide them through the turbulent waters of their past. "We don't have to be defined by the past. We can build something new." Just as he prepared to dive deeper into what lay ahead, a sudden, louder crash echoed from behind, punctuating the air, interrupting the deep moment they had been striving to embrace. "What now?" Tim's voice trembled, vibrating with a mix of anxiety and adrenaline, questioning the stability of the ground beneath them. Jack felt an overwhelming urge to shield them against any stronger disruptions. "Stay close," he repeated, the weight of uncertainty returning like an old, haunting melody. They had ventured into new territory, but the real battle lay ahead, and it would demand every ounce of strength they had. As Jack faced the source of the noise, he couldn't help but wonder, was it merely external chaos threatening to upend their fragile resolve, or was it a harbinger of deeper truths that awaited them? Would they find the strength to embrace vulnerability or allow chaos to swallow them whole? Jack took a moment, his pulse quickening as the noise settled into a deep thrum in his chest. The air felt heavy with an unnatural silence that followed the crash, amplifying the chaos gnawing at his thoughts. "We need to figure out what that was," he declared, trying to inject assertiveness into his shaky resolve. He stepped cautiously into the creaking light of the garage. His instincts screamed at him, aware that the world beyond their fragile circle could be a minefield of hidden fears and untold stories. Around them, tools lay scattered, symbolic remnants of aspirations long left unattended, much like his own ambitions. "Stay behind me," he instructed Tim again as they moved closer to the source of the noise. With each step, Jack felt burdened by years of avoidance and denial. The mess around them mirrored the chaos within him, yet an ember of determination flickered to life. He refused to let this moment of upheaval limit them. "Dad," Tim muttered, breaking the tense stillness as he peered over Jack's shoulder. "What if it's not now?" Jack interrupted, forcing his attention on the surroundings. Inside him, a churning conflict battled, the desire to protect him from the unknown, and the burgeoning acknowledgement that sometimes, growth required direct confrontation with danger. Suddenly, a figure stepped into view amidst the shadows, a neighbor from across the street. "Hey! You okay?" A mix of concern and urgency laced his voice. Jack felt the knot in his stomach tighten. It was a reminder of their isolation, of how intertwined their lives had become with those outside their walls. "We're fine," Jack replied, the lie forming readily on his lips, though not a single fiber of his being felt tranquil. "Just checking. Heard the crash. Thought the place was coming down." The neighbor's nervous chuckle reflected Jack's internal turmoil, and he realized how life outside continued, unaware of the seismic shifts happening within. With the neighbor dismissed and retreating back into the comfort of his own life, Jack turned his focus back to Tim. He knew they had no choice but to confront the truths hiding in their shadows. "We're not fine," he admitted, the willingness to engage with deeper fears taking a bold turn. Tim crossed his arms, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. "What if we just ignore everything? It's easier that way." Jack hesitated, the notion echoed the very fears he wrestled with. Ignoring the chaos might seem easy, but it was also stagnation, a choice that had long kept them bound in silence. "But what has easier ever brought us, Tim?" His voice dropped to a near whisper. "Real healing demands courage." "Courage to do what?" Tim pressed, seeking specifics in the tempest of emotion. "Face the past." "Sure," Jack replied, a flicker of insight lighting his resolve. "Face each other, our fears, everything we've buried." Tim's brows furrowed. Jack could see the boy wanting to both fight back and cling to the familiar. "What if we don't like what we find?" "We might not like it," Jack affirmed, the tension gripping his heart. "But think of how liberating it would be to not carry it on our backs anymore." In those words, Jack sensed the shift within himself, an awareness that lingering wounds could either suffocate them or serve as a catalyst for much-needed growth. Each memory they buried was a tangled thread, unknowing of how to unravel it had trapped them in a cycle of hurt. "Let us talk about the fear," he said, his voice steadying as he lifted the weight of his fears to meet his son's gaze. "Let us give it a voice. Let us challenge it." Tim glanced up, a hesitant glimmer of understanding dawning across his features. "You really think we can move past all this?" "I know we can," Jack asserted, a mix of vulnerability and conviction rushing through him. "But only if we're willing to face it together." The promise of understanding loomed just out of reach, and the tension that had bound them now transformed into a spark of potential. Jack could feel the shadows of doubt dissipate, replaced by a burgeoning sense of possibility. But just as the atmosphere began to shift, the ground shook slightly beneath them. The chaos outside had transformed into a relentless storm that threatened to drown their newfound resolve. "Dad," Tim whispered, a newfound resolve firming his voice. "Let us do this." "Together," Jack echoed, as adrenaline fueled his purpose. As they stepped further into the eye of their emotional storm, Jack felt an undeniable excitement mixed with trepidation. They were on the brink of something monumental, yet the deeper truths looming ahead threatened to pull them down. But before they could plunge into the depths, another crash thundered, reverberating through the air, as if the universe was both warning and beckoning them toward truth. Jack stood frozen, realizing he had underestimated how far the reverberations of their past could reach. "Are you ready?" he asked Tim, his heart pounding against the daunting uncertainty. The weight of the moment hung heavy, echoing a truth that felt both terrifying and beautiful. As they teetered on the brink, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that the pulse of outside chaos was more than just a disturbance. Maybe it was signaling the tumultuous revelations ahead that would reshape them all. What lay in wait could either be their reckoning or their salvation. Would they seize the moment, or would it slip through their fingers once more? Jack stood in the garage, his heart racing as he realized they were finally on the threshold of confronting the tangled web of past emotions, fears, and regrets. The air was thick with unspoken truths, each word pressing against the walls, just waiting for the chance to erupt. Tim was beside him, shifting from uncertainty to a quiet resolve, signaling that they both understood this was their pivotal moment. As the vibrations of the outside world faded into the background, Jack turned to Tim. "We've carried those shadows for too long. It's time to strip them away, to let the light in." The urge to move forward felt almost magnetic. He sensed that fear would no longer define them. "Okay," Tim replied, a hint of defiance lacing his voice. "Let us do it." The flicker of courage in Tim's eyes ignited a fire within Jack. He would lead them into the emotional storm. They were prepared, even if they would face discomfort. "I've spent so much of my life running from the shadows of my past," Jack confessed, his voice steady but tinted with vulnerability. "I've been scared of the anger, of the wounds that never healed. But no more." Each word was an affirmation, a declaration that he would no longer let fear dictate his life or his relationship with his son. As he began to share stories about his father, his struggles, his crippling expectations, and the heavy silence that had defined their interactions, Jack felt a catharsis unfolding. "My dad was compassionate, but he also inadvertently taught me to bury my feelings. I thought I was protecting you by holding back, Tim, but now I see that the true protection lies in being open." With each revelation, Jack noticed the tension in Tim's frame begin to melt like ice in the sun. The barriers were dismantling, layer by layer, transforming painful memories into bridges toward understanding. "Tell me more," Tim urged, leaning forward, hungry for truth, yet still wrestling with his emotions. "You need to know that confronting this can be painful," Jack warned. "But it's also liberating. It's about discerning who we are, not who our wounds have led us to be." He paused, ensuring the connection was authentic and present. "Underneath the burdens we've inherited, there's room for healing, understanding, even love." Tim's brow was furrowed with a mix of curiosity and trepidation, but Jack could see that the conversations hadn't pushed him away. They had invited him closer. Seizing that moment, Jack shared how, fueled by anger and misunderstanding, he had estranged himself from the possibility of building a different future. "I swore I would never let that anger boil over like it did with my dad, but I saw confusion instead of reaching out. I neglected to show you that vulnerability doesn't equate to weakness." Tim began to nod, the embers of comprehension sparking in his eyes. "I've felt that distance. There's always been a wall between us. If we don't talk about this now, what will it take for something to shift?" Jack inhaled deeply, feeling the shift occurring not just in their conversation, but in the very foundation of their family legacy. "If we intend to redefine our future, we've got to envision us as the architects of our narrative, rather than mere reflections of the past." "But what if this is just one big cycle?" "It's scary to think about," Tim admitted, wrestling with doubt that loomed. "That fear is legitimate, but it's delegitimized by our courage," Jack declared, heart swelling. "As soon as we uncover our pain, we can also rewrite the rules of our relationship." Tim's sharp gaze softened. "You really believe we can fix this?" "I don't just believe it, I know it. By engaging with the messy, the uncomfortable, we're growing. And even if it leads to discomfort, we must learn to lean into it, together." In that instant, they crossed an invisible threshold. The realization that vulnerability was no longer a burden defined them. It was an invitation to explore new depths of understanding. Jack felt healed just by articulating this truth, feelings spilling into the spaces once occupied by silence. "You're my son, and it's time I act like a father, not just a shadow weighing down my past," Jack concluded, a note of hope shining through. Tim straightened, a sense of clarity surfacing. "Let us face the fears together. I want to learn." I want us to grow. The gravity of his response washed over Jack like a beacon, confirming they were no longer standing at opposite ends of the bridge. They were ready to walk across it. With newfound determination, Jack spoke again. Let us make a pact. Memories, both joyous and burdensome, don't have to isolate us. When we confront them, they no longer hold dominion over us. We can rebuild what's worth fighting for. As they both committed to the path before them, Jack felt the warmth of potential seep into his bones. The echoes of their past no longer haunted them, they were preparing to integrate the lessons into their current realities. Together, we'll face every aspect of our lives, past and present. This is the moment we redefine our relationship, Jack assured, sensing that the journey they were undertaking was one of mutual respect, validation, and empowerment. As Tim smiled back, a raw feeling of relief washed over Jack. They were ready to venture into the unknown, hand in hand, buoyed by hope and the promise of brighter days. Jack had not only shed layers of his past but was poised to forge ahead, uniquely equipped to embrace the future. This was the moment of accomplishment, the acceptance of vulnerability, and Jack, at long last, felt free. You need to subscribe now to our channel to catch every exclusive emotional journey we delve into next. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and uplift these powerful narratives. Comment with your thoughts and reactions. How did the transformation resonate with you? Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this journey of growth and redemption.